Joe, I'm a big fan of yours. I've watched you in Ruffino, and I even know of your relationship with Ryan Roberts, who also worked for AtoZ. So I watched the video of you guys talking about some Notre Dame stuff this past week. So big fan of you, Joe, and some of the work that you do. So thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm fired up to be here with you guys and to chop it up, and just really excited to dig into it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I'm super excited. Bryce has been
yeah.
talking about you since earlier this past week. I'm like, hey, man, we got to talk some football. Who you got?
Yeah.
He sent me you, and I'm like, oh, yeah. I was like, and wait a second. We already follow each other. So I've seen him before. I was like, it's perfect, man. Let's go. And so, like, before we dig in, I definitely want to bring you in the discussion we just got done having. And if I asked Bryce, I said, let's say you're Kurt Signetti, okay, or at that level, okay. You got these NFL teams looking at you, that all these head coaching vacancies, which are I think 8 right now. You got these head coaching vacancies open right now. You're Kurt Signetti. Which team do you go to? What looks most appealing to you?
I think that if he theoretically did make the jump, I know he on Saturday, which every college coach makes a statement. Marcus Freeman made this statement continuously of, oh, I'm not an NFL guy. And then, not long after, we'll find out that there's some sort of an announcement. We'll see what ends up happening here with Cincinnati.
Everything has a price.
Right.
Everything.
Exactly. It's a bargaining chip to say that you have no interest. But I think that there's 2 jobs ultimately that would be worth his while. The rest, I don't know if there's necessarily a fit. The first, I think, is pretty obvious, being the Las Vegas Raiders. I know it's not been a great run organization lately, but the opportunity to just step right in and immediately bring in Fernando Mendoza with the first overall pick, that would be a no-brainer. I think that Signetti, if you are the coach who's commanding, so much of the respect of these NFL openings, you'd want to go somewhere where you'd have the ultimate control. And it's not even just the control of being able to pick your quarterback. You're literally getting to pick the guy that you just had with you along this magical season. So that would be amazing. It's also a historic franchise that has not been successful. And he literally just did this with Indiana, turning them into a winner and completely blowing away everybody's expectations. He can now do that with a franchise that has not been a consistent winner and returning them to their glory. The only other one that I think that makes sense, and I guess you could kind of include the Ravens with this, but the Steelers, the track record of how few coaches they've had, I think, is true to their ability to hire coaches, the ability to support those coaches, the infrastructure that they have built there. The only thing that I believe would maybe give any decision maker pause with taking that job is the quarterback situation is just a mess. They're picking in the back end of the first round. Aaron Rodgers is not expected to be coming back in the future. Do you buy into Will Howard? Is this a team that you think you're going to be able to swing a trade for any of the guys that are out there, maybe in unsettled situations? Are you going to go and trade for somebody who's a backup right now? Do you go get Malik Willis? I think that for how unsettled that aspect of it is, might turn some people away, but there's the general brand of being the Steelers coach. Any coach is going to want to be there. So if Signetti did make the jump, that makes sense, not to mention the fact the ties that he has to that region.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't anticipate he moves on, but we'll have to see. We've talked about it for a couple of weeks here that it's potentially a possibility, just because how the rumor mill gets going whenever some NFL executive says, oh, just throws it out in the media like Signetti might be a name, where like it happened, like you said, with Marcus Freeman. It's just because of how they're winning consistently over these last couple of years. So, but let's focus here on the title game down in Miami. Is this the most improbable title matchup in the playoff era? I mean, for me, it is, when you look at the matchup and where these teams and where these programs have been, it just in the most recent history.
I mean, I would say so, but I think that there's 2 ways of looking at that, where, yes, absolutely, like Indiana getting this far, nobody expects it, and Miami having 2 losses in the middle of the year that reshaped our expectations for how they were going to perform during the college football playoff. It absolutely is improbable, but the way that I've kind of been looking at this is, I think that this is the perfect example of what we wanted the expanded playoff to be. It's part of the reason also why I don't want any further expansion. I think that 12 has painted the picture for a perfect bracket with some minor adjustments for reshaping the whole 2G5 team thing. That's a whole separate issue. But I think that it has allowed for more opportunities for teams to rebound from mistakes. And I think that, sure, it's improbable that we've reached with these two teams, but now we have opportunities for programs that have really good rosters that might have hit a bump in the middle of the road to recalibrate and readjust. I think that now we're starting to see whichever team is going to be able to end the season the hottest is going to be the team that's most effectively positioned to go on a run. I know that this is kind of separate from the conversation of, or the talking point that you just asked, but it also, I think that like we're landing in this spot now where do we need to revisit how these teams are being seeded and the whole bye situation? I think that for all of that and how we've seen from last year, I think that it's shaped up for what has made a lot of sense for these final two teams and how far they've gotten.
Yeah, I mean, two programs that, like Bryce was saying, especially IU, not a lot of success in that program's history, and you have Miami, who hasn't been here in what seems like a long time. And so you look at these two head coaches that have, kind of turned these programs around. Which coach do you trust the most going into this championship?
I guess I trust Signetti the most, but here's the thing: is that Mario? I said that I didn't trust Mario going into the Texas A&M game, and I have been before that. I was all in on Mario. I thought that before they lost to Louisville that he had kind of figured things out and he's figured out his identity. Winning the Notre Dame game was his biggest win at Miami. And that was usually you get that big win out of the way. And that is how you end up starting to build momentum. The thing is, though, is Cristobal has had that track record of not not performing well late in tight games like this. I think that there's going to be like preparedness. I think that they're going to be prepared. I think that the fact that so many people publicly are doubting them and people have doubted them through this entire bracket, it's kind of going to do away with that. I would be shocked if they started slow. Like the last game is a really perfect example. You have the entire SEC world saying that, oh, Miami lost to these crappy ACC teams. Ole Miss is going to blow past them. Trinidad Chambliss is going to make victims of that defensive line. And they proved that they've got the physicality that the SEC has always had. They punched him in the mouth up front. I think that the Ole Miss game, the Ohio State game, everybody thought that game was going to be a walk. Everybody thought that they couldn't beat Texas A&M. Has changed our belief in that Cristobal can't get them ready. But at the end of the day, the coach that you have to trust more is Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti has, for every single battle that they've had, not only have they been ready to go, they have also dominated their way through this path. And ultimately, they did get matchups where they were facing off with teams that were battling through injuries that I think accentuated some of the imbalances of the teams that they faced with Oregon and with Alabama. But the fact that they have seen blood and they've just attacked, they haven't taken their foot off the gas, speaks to how prepared and how ready to go his team is. So I think that the edge goes slightly to Cignetti, but I don't think anybody should believe that there's some sort of a gap because both of these coaches have reached this perfect crescendo of what has been, great seasons for both of them.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see if we do get late in the game and where Miami might have a lead. Does Mario Ball creep in? Does that conservative nature kick in for Miami? I think they're maybe have been able to prove themselves otherwise here, like you said recently, and especially in that Ole Miss game where they needed a drive, and it feels like every time they're in a big game, and you probably wouldn't classify SMU or Louisville a big game, but like you mentioned, the Notre Dame game, these playoff games, they've had these drives late in games when they absolutely needed it. And I think that has kind of where the narrative has really, shifted with this Miami team and under Cristobal, where, last year, you go back to last year and they would, get very conservative and get tight and then make the mistake, the back-breaking mistake. And it feels like they haven't really done that because I've been waiting for Carson Beck to make that mistake, and he hasn't done it yet so far in the playoff.
Right. And what really impressed me the most, and one of the things that I kind of kept saying when I didn't think that they'd be able to beat Ohio State and be able to beat Texas A&M, one of the things I kept saying is, well, the team that they're facing has the edge at quarterback. I just didn't know if I could buy into Carson Beck. He has been mistake prone and he has made brutal errors in those late game situations. He did against Louisville and against SMU. But the bigger question that I had is, if the game was on the line, do I trust Carson Beck to deliver on a clutch throw when he needs to? And I thought that final drive against Ole Miss was so perfect for him, because everything that he was asked to do fit exactly what he is capable of accomplishing. It's not like, and I'm not trying to like downplay the drive, but I thought that Shannon Dawson called the perfect drive there to understand, hey, let's keep everything in front of us. Let's be very methodical. We don't need to rush this. Carson Beck, historically, when he's played his worst, he has gotten out of his element because he has tried to do too much and he has been pressing and rushing. So it was all just chunk, rip apart, and then put yourself in a position to win. And it kind of plays to this just overall identity of Miami, where we're going to grind you down. We're going to take a bite of you every single way until we end up finishing the job. That final drive, I think, has completely changed how I look at this game overall too, because as much as he's facing a really good defense, and as much as he probably will have a turnover going up against just a almost perfectly fundamentally sound defense for Indiana, I think that he just reminded us that, hey, there is a clutch version of Carson Beck. If it was a one-score game in the fourth quarter, I wouldn't completely doubt him, and I wouldn't just assume that he's going to falter.
Yeah, good stuff. So something that I've been bringing up the last couple of weeks that I want to get your thoughts on. So let's say, which we're Hoosiers ourselves, so I guess you call us homers, I guess. I'm a Purdue fan, so like I guess I'm kind of cheering for IU, not really. But if you're going to represent the state of Indiana, you better do good, okay? But all seriousness, if IU runs the table, they complete it, they complete the sweep, they go undefeated, where would you put them in terms of all-time teams? Because I said, like, look, in terms of what I've seen this year, everyone brings up the 2001 Miami team. Yeah. A lot of them went on to be Hall of Famers in the NFL. No big deal, whatever. But what people I don't like that comparison, because like that doesn't necessarily mean that team was better than this team. They may have went on and been better, individually, but in terms of like together, this IU team, I think if they put it together in this championship game, I personally believe their resume of the teams that they beat, players they went against, I think this has to go down as one of the best teams ever. Where would you put them when this is all said and done?
I would just slightly separate I think that this would be the most this would be the most this would be the best season ever. That was how that I think that I would look at it in terms of what they were able to accomplish despite not fitting the typical criteria to have gotten to this point and to win a national championship. If we're talking best teams of all time, I have to put the 2019 LSU team ahead of them because of the amount of ranked teams that they beat along the way, the amount of top players, not even the guys that are going to go on that potentially could be Hall of Famers in the NFL and went on to be high draft picks. You just had every position group had a player on it that was one of the best in the country that year. I think that the 2020 Alabama team and the 2001 Miami team fits that same description. But at the end of the day, where like I look at the best season ever, I think that this is the greatest coaching job ever, and nothing is going to touch it, for the fact that nobody had any belief that a brand like this would get this far, would get this good this quickly, would be able to beat the teams that they did to get this far, and to have done it with mostly guys, actually pretty much no guys that were premier 5-star recruits. I think, though, the one thing that makes it hard for me, though, to commit to this belief that it would be better than any of those other top teams that did some unreal things, is they just weren't challenged as much. And I know that's kind of hard to relitigate that to a degree because of the fact that like they can't help who they played. They played a much smaller sample size of like really, really tough teams to get to this point. I don't think what LSU did that in 2019 is such a ridiculous year, to have the talent, to have dominated everybody along the way, and to have played that many top teams. I think that creates just a separate bucket of separation. But I do agree. I think that your logic, though, I think is great, because I think that it's been generally flawed that when we have this discussion, it's just everyone just yells and goes, oh, that 2001 Miami team had so many good players. Well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, than just having that discussion like that.
Yeah, I would I would agree with what you're saying as far as the season. Also, we're like comparing different eras because that was a 4-team playoff era. This
Right.
is the 12-team, so it's like it's when it's like the NBA comparison, like in the Jordan and LeBron and stuff. And like it gets all like up in the air, and you could just like
Bill
okay,
Russell
whatever
versus
your
Shaq.
yeah.
Right.
So like whatever your like your favorite is just you're probably just going to defend that the most. So yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you said there. What's the matchup on the field that you're most looking forward to watching and may go a long way in deciding this game? Because you brought up the final drive for Miami against Ole Miss, and they're probably tired because they were on the field for a majority of that game. And when I look at Indiana's defensive front, and if they can get after Carson Beck, especially in that fourth quarter, and don't allow him and speed him up and all that stuff, that's where I'm looking forward to the most. Is can IU generate pressure and speed up Carson Beck? But what's the matchup that you are most intrigued in watching on Monday night?
Yeah, for me, it's the battles along both lines of scrimmage. I said this in my immediate gut reaction after Indiana won, and we knew what the matchup was going to be. Was God, the pads might be cracking so hard in this game that it's just like you can hear it through the TV. I think that this is going to be a really physical game right from the first whistle. I think that is going to be a matchup. Whoever does end up breaking through and really, really is able to punch the other team in the mouth the most is going to win this game. And I think that matchup too, a lot of people I believe are somewhat getting wrong. I think that Indiana has proven that, again, they're the most fundamentally sound team. They're the most technically sound team. They're very rarely out of position on both sides of the ball. They're hat for a hat when they're blocking. They're downhill. They're not really allowing much separation or any big plays after contact. Like they're just not letting any broken plays occur. But the difference here for what Miami brings to the table is that they do have the better O-line and D-line. They have an O-line and a D-line that is headlined by a first-round player with Ruben Bain on their defensive line and with Francis Maui-Noah on their offensive line. And I think both of those squads, if they're able to play to their potential, that is what keeps this game close. I ultimately think what wins Indiana the game are those fundamentals, is that just that precise nature of not allowing any big plays to break through for Miami in the run game or from Malachi Toney. But this game, to me, I think is going to be much closer. Miami covers because of the war that is going to happen in the trenches.
So what's your official prediction when it's all said and done, and how do we get there?
I think Indiana wins this game. I think that it is going to be a 6-3 point game. I think that it is going to come down to final couple drives in the fourth quarter. My biggest bit with this and why I don't see a blowout happening, the blowout happens if Carson Beck has early turnovers and they get pressure and they get sacks and short fields. That to me is, as we've always seen, and Miami has done this where there's been mistakes like that, Indiana immediately blows the game open and they end up turning it into a domination. It's what happened against Oregon. They were just off by a little bit and they turned that into a gigantic margin. But why this game ends up being close, I think that Miami is going to keep this game slow. I think that they're going to run the ball a ton like they did against Ole Miss. I think that they're going to be able to get pressure on Mendoza and potentially produce a game-altering turnover. But where Indiana ends up winning and creating extra separation to win this game, maybe on one of those final drives in the fourth quarter, is being able to attack Miami's secondary. I think from the very beginning, we're going to see a lot of those jump balls that they love to throw to Becker and to Surratt, especially with Xavier Lucas out of the first half with the targeting penalty that he suffered against or that he committed against Ole Miss. So I think that Indiana wins because they've got that matchup that they can exploit, and Miami's going to keep the game slow. It's going to keep it low scoring, and it'll end up being decided in the fourth.
Joe, like I said, I'm a big fan of your work, and make sure you guys catch him on AtoZ Sports, Ruffino and Joe. And thank you so much for joining us here on the show. And I hope we have you on sometime, talk more NFL. I know you do a lot of NFL
Absolutely.
coverage as well. And thank you so much for joining us on the show here today.
Yeah, this was a blast. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm looking forward to see how the games go and where the game goes, and looking forward to chopping up again soon.